Artists. We're often misunderstood because we express ourselves in so many various different ways. What, might you ask, makes me think that as a 65-year-old woman, I could be a filmmaker? I've asked myself the same question. And the answer is always the same. Because I can. Because I am. Why? Because I'm an artist. What kind of an artist? I don't paint pictures. I don't draw very well. I'm not the greatest writer. But I'm an artist. I've always been an artist. All my life. For 40 years of my life, I was a hairdresser. 40 years. Listening to people's stories, making people look beautiful, making people feel good about themselves, making the best of what they have. It's like taking a house that needs a little sprucing up and someone else can't quite see what needs to be done. And you just go in there and you just know. And you do it. And people are happy about that. After many years of being a hairdresser, I stepped away from it because I felt a calling to do something else. Tell stories. My head was swimming with stories. My own life has been a story. But do I want to tell my story, or was it safer to tell other people's stories? It was safer to tell other people's stories. So I disappeared when my kids were old enough to be on their own. And I started to write. I wasn't great at writing, but I was able to capture stories that I heard over the years and put them in a book. I've written several books. I spent the better part of those 40 years as a hairdresser with a cute little boutique hair salon in my home. Why? Because I was a single mom of 4 children during those years. And I wanted to be at home with them, and it just seemed the best way to raise my children the way I wanted them to be raised. So I had to be home. I had to be near them. Once I put this book into publication, all those years of stories, I decided that they would make for a great television series. Lots of little short scenarios and people's lives, a window into different lifestyles and stories. And so I was lucky enough to be able to put my book in front of one of Hollywood's iconic agents, Ron Bernstein. Through a friend that we both shared, I was connected to him, and he was good enough to be able to take a look at my book and want to chat with me. So I flew out to Hollywood, stayed with my oldest son. I went to dinner with his friend and my son. Ron Bernstein, if you don't already know, he's the agent that takes books to film. When Harry Met Sally, Sex and the City, those are all his. And I couldn't believe he was going to spend the time with me to take a look at mine. And he read it. We went to dinner, we had a great time. I adored him. But he said I was invisible in the book, and that I needed to go back and write another 50 or 100 pages and tell my story. Well, I couldn't tell my story, at least not the one that kept coming to mind, because I was threatened to be killed if I told my story. If you've seen the movie Filthy Rich Asians, that was my story. Well, I didn't get to write it. Someone else beat me to it. But that was my story, and that was the beginning of my motherhood. It was a story that can't be told, but it set the tone for me becoming a very independent woman. Fell in love with the wrong guy, and he belonged to a set of traditions that was not going to allow us to go forward together and be married. And so he left and went back to his country. I can't even tell you what country it is, but he was a filthy rich Asian. And I became a mom. He left me with his child, and that was the beginning of a new life for me, as it is for every mother. Life changes when you become a mom. And mine changed. And after I had 3 more children, beautiful family of 4 children, I didn't trust anyone to help me raise my children. So they were my precious cargo, and I decided that I was the best person to raise them, and so I became a single mom. But I couldn't tell Ron that story, not all of it. So I wrote about other stories, and we never got in touch again after that. Cameras. Scenes. Settings. Food. People. Food and wine. Conversations. They were all swimming in my head. I grew up in a home that wined and dined from the time I was very young. I knew how to cook. I knew how to entertain. My whole family does. My 3 sisters we're all great in the kitchen. We could throw down a party you would never imagine. And so I started a food blog. And it was a lot of fun. I cooked for the camera every day for 3 years on video. I wasn't interested in still shots. I wanted to tell a story with my food, and for me, the video was the way to do it. So I learned to be a one-woman producer. I learned to set the stage. I had to learn lighting, all the camera equipment, sound, texture. Bring people into the stories. If I want to cook crabs, I decided I needed to go out on the boat with the waterman and watch him get the crabs and bring them back and tell his story. So I started putting it all together. I learned how to do my own editing, and I became a storyteller. It all centered around the kitchen and food. I brought people into it. I brought the textures, the music, and all those things that I saw in my head that I wanted to present to you. And then it took me out of the kitchen. And I went to Hollywood and did a little stint with Food Network and met a fabulous woman who had also been involved with food blogs for a number of years, way longer than me. And we decided we were going to do something together. We were going to start telling some stories of our own. So I've created stories. I've written dozens of stories about everyday people. And I set the stage, and I planned the menu, and we cooked it, and I am in all of the stories, and I'm behind the cameras. I usually will have 2 cameras rolling at any given time. Sometimes even a cell phone is up on selfie mode, so it's constantly running. And I learned how to capture the visuals, because that's what I started doing as an artist when I was very young. Visuals. It's how we judge a book, by its cover. So for me, words alone in a book was not my forte. And for me, I felt restricted. I needed to make these words come alive on screen, in color, with sound and music, and backdrops and nature and architecture. And so I've created 8 episodes just to see if you might like them. And that's what I am ready to put out into the world and tell stories with my camera. Is there a story in there for you? Is there a story in there about you? Probably. You're going to have to check it out for yourself and see if there's something in there that hits home for you, that tells your story. This little diddly, was it written by Nat King Cole? I don't know. It was sung by him. But my dad was a piano player, and I used to hear him play music in the house on this piano. And words to songs were stories about life, about love, romance, loss, happiness, sadness, and they become part of the story we tell with film. It's not just about pictures. It's not just about action. It's about sitting down and hearing what someone has to say and how they want to portray that story in whatever setting it is. I mean, I was in Brazil for a while. I even imagined myself having to go up into the jungle with all the mosquitoes, which I don't like. If it meant telling a story. I was crazy curious about natural medicine while I was there, and so I was taking in everything I could with my camera. There's a story to be told around every corner and in every face. We all have a story to tell, and I want to tell them with my camera. Come join me on this adventure late in my life as a visual storyteller, and see if I can't wow you just a little, or make you cry just a little, and certainly make you laugh a whole lot. Come join me. Let's have some fun. Let's tell your story.